Welcome to the Human AI Alliance podcast. I'm your host, Lee Bristow. We invite guests onto the podcast to give detailed, high-resolution answers to questions we all have about the AI Human Alliance. Today, we have Francisco Vaglienti, freelance AI solutions architect, building Gen AI, specialist in Azure AI, RAG, and LLM ops. So thank you very much for joining the Human AI Alliance podcast. Welcome, Francisco. How are you doing, man?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be on.
Yeah, so maybe just as a start, can you give us a little bit of an intro about who you are and how you managed to trip your way or fight your way into the AI world?
So, believe it or not, my background is actually in psychology, neuropsychology,
Wow.
which, yeah, a lot of people actually don't remember that neural networks actually came from there because we used for fMRIs and EEGs. You look at it, it just looks at noise, like noise, and even the most advanced stats couldn't get you there. And so I actually really wanted to go into research. And I did the classic psychologist trap of you go into research, so you go really heavy into statistics, figure that you actually fall in love with statistics even more so than psychology. And then you go, well, what can I do? The hardest statistics, well, was to do a master in AI. And so I did a research master in AI, actually started to do research, published some algorithms. And well, I have to say, was about to publish some algorithms, and then COVID hit. And I did what, yeah, any self-respecting researcher does who thinks they have good algorithms, and I went into finance in it with it to see if they worked. And a couple of successful years later, I'm now working for like a diverse set of clients implementing Gen AI. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey because when I started, obviously you didn't have ChatGPT and you could not sell AI. People were like, AI is just a gimmick, it's a toy, it's dumb, I'm not going to waste resources on it. The amount of conversations I've had where I was like begging the customer, like, I'm going to save you money. Here's the math. Just do the math. And nowadays, people are just like calling me left and right, like, please, can you do something with AI? I don't care. Here's a bag of money. Go do AI. So it's interesting.
And,
It's very
and pretend
interesting.
like you're giving me some value back, at least in some
Yeah, yeah,
shape,
yeah.
way, or form, right?
Yeah, just add AI to the web page. Just like and like make it like with a gradient shiny so that it looks like it works. Then like beyond that, we just want the stock boost is what we want.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing story from going from psychology into statistics and then masters in AI. Yeah, that is really quite a journey. So I know you and I were chatting before we started up, and one of the ideas that you floated was let them code, let them play with shiny toys, and let them fail, and them being developers.
Yeah,
Within teams. So, currently there's a lot of organizations and individuals and freelancers that can do either front end or back end or full stack development, but are a little bit afraid to kind of step over the line and get into the AI side of development essentially. And so I know, like when we were chatting, it's sort of how do you actually do that? How do you get leaders to encourage their teams to be able to actually start to understand? And that was kind of the first piece, was just let them code. So, do you have any case studies around that, and where you may have seen that actually working out, where the leader actually encouraged it, or where
yeah,
individuals picked it up and said, you know what, Python is the way forward, I'm going to go.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let me actually, before I answer the how, let me actually answer the why, because that's also important to me. Because uh, so originally I started at a startup in fintech,
Yeah.
and coming in as a researcher, you just have a bunch of algorithms and you get a bunch of financial data, and everything looks big and scary and complicated, especially like I was really young. Well, I think I was really young at that time. And so you're just like, everyone that's older than me knows so much better. And what we found out was that actually we had like huge boosts that we could take and like there were huge gains, just like actual money just left on the table, like just arbitrage dollars in finance. And all we had to do is just go past a couple of algorithms and just check them off and try this, try that. And of course, at the time, all of this was untested. You didn't know if it had any value. So I carried this. So that for me is the why, because I know it works out. I know these novel technologies have just not been implemented in business because business is just so far behind in ideas. And you can get a lot of extra value out of that. And the how you implement that is, I think, what is it? The best art is stolen, but slightly improved. And so essentially, I've just copied when I started to have my own teams and my own teams of teams. Um, what I did is, so my whole family from my father's side, save except me, comes from a military background, and so there's this general sense that, like, as the squad leader, you're responsible for your squad, and
Yeah.
you need to make sure that everyone in that squad makes it out alive. So I like to see myself when people ask me, like, what is it that you do as a leader? I'm like, I'm the wall that takes all the bullets from up to make sure that like the people who are in my team can do their job and they can fail and they can mess up. And then if they mess up, then it's on me. It's not on them. On the other
Yeah.
hand, that does mean that they need to be, they need to trust you and they also need to listen because, it goes both ways, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, I mean, that's the kind of empowering element around that. And I think what you're referring to is almost having a safe space to be able to actually do that development because,
Yeah.
ultimately, even if you've got a full stack developer or a front end developer or back end, they're going to have to learn new skills, which means that they're going to have to potentially break a few things, and that gets a little bit scary around how you go about doing that, right?
Yeah.
And I think when in order to be able to kind of continue playing, right, you almost need to get those little shiny toys. You need to get the tools, download the tool sets. You're going to need to understand your different large language models that you have available to you, what you can have, what you can build, how you can actually integrate them within your data sets. And I know one of the things that we wanted to do today, which was actually do some or share some coding snippets on
Yep.
how you can actually do this practically. And I know this is not something that we've normally done, but I would really, really love everyone's just attention in terms of how, not easy, but potentially how easy this can be once all the building blocks are in place, once the team is in place, once the knowledge is in place, once the governance and structure is in place. I think that's maybe the key element. So, Francisco, do you want to share your screen quickly, and we
Yep.
can just run through what that looks like?
Yeah. Okay. So you should see my screen right now, I hope.
Yep, yep.
All right. So let me tell you a little bit about actually, let me tell you a little bit about this application. So here, a lot of businesses want to get their data out, but for a lot of those businesses, when they look at their data and they look at their website, they get this, which I can't read it, you can't read it, it's gobbledygook. But they ask, how can I make these documents readable? And well, let's say through a couple of steps with a little bit of experience, you can get them into actual readable texts here. Now, this is actually something that I did, let's say, as a, I guess, a work of charity, because I'm part of this Buddhist organization. And what the organization wanted is to be able to communicate with the founder, who, of course, has passed away 8 centuries ago. So for this, we had to collect all of the texts, clean them up, put them in an AI, and then get them to be able to chat with them, which let me get you here. And essentially, what that script does is you can see here we have the chatbot. I can ask, like, what is the reason to practice Buddhism. Oh, practice, pardon my Dutch spelling. And it's going to start looking through the files and actually referencing the files and speaking in the tone, in the manner of the founder of this particular sect of Buddhism. And we get all of these results with essentially what it'll be like 20 lines of code right here. And
Okay.
the reason I wanted to show you this is like if we just look at this, we have like 4 references. This is like I did this in a weekend in like an afternoon. And you can get all of these results because you let the devs play with the shiny new toys. This is actually uh, the reason that I know of this technology and that I've used this technology is because I was on a project and we did it the old school way, the tried and trusted way. And one of the devs in my team was like, "Hey, I know we're doing this, and I know that it'll work, but I'd like to try this method out." And for me, I had this consideration of, all right, well, I'm gonna lose a dev for like 2 weeks over this, but you know what? I trust you. You're
Yeah.
smart. Go at it. And we figured that actually, with this, all of the other work we had to do, suddenly didn't have to do it. And we get these great results. You can see we get these chats, we get a history. I can ask, can you tell me more? It's going to know what I'm referencing on the history.
Yeah.
I'm going to elaborate. And that's just incredible. Now, of course, you're not always going to hit, right? But the point is that when you hit, those wins are going to mean so much more for you than your losses. And so that's why I actually wanted to show this example, because yeah, I think it's a good practical example of you can do it the difficult way, and the difficult way does work, but by leaving yourself open to experimentation, you're going to find these massive shortcuts that are going to just like reap benefits. It's not always going to go right, but when it goes right, it's going to save you tons of time. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of that kind of thing, you basically you're talking about a religious element here, and you are kind of grounding your AI within that context. So, what guardrails do you have around it? How are you addressing those sort of challenges from an ethical perspective inside that example?
That's a really good point that you're raising because just like when you reference, actually, even more than when you're referencing business data, when you're talking about religion, just to make it simple, because uh, I don't think a lot of people will know Nichiren Daishonin. Let's take the example of Jesus. If I would want to ask Jesus something and I would give Jesus only the Old Testament, or I would just ask ChatGPT to be like Jesus, I'm going to get nonsense out, right? And here is where, let's say, the senior element comes in, where what guardrails get reacted to, what works, what doesn't, what you have to watch out for. And so you get this nice interplay, just like with, well, old-fashioned software, where true experience and true, well, knowledge, you know how to make sure that the responses that you're getting will stay true, in this case, to the religious character. They will keep citing texts, and they won't just hallucinate stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I
Okay.
have to say that's a good question. It's a very good point, and yeah, what really does it is experience. I have a lot of juniors actually that come up with me, and I mean I can go into a more detailed answer of how exactly, but I think that's a little bit too technical for now. But it is a question that often comes up, and the annoying answer is experience.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads me a little bit into my next sort of thought, which is you've got to fail a bit, right? Because one of the things that you said, you've come up in your lessons, you've learned your lessons, you've had a bunch of juniors come up with you, but the idea of letting them fail, and again, them being developers, project managers, product managers, that sends cold shivers down any risk compliance, security person in attendance, CEO that is just sitting out there going, oh my head, what, like, how can you be let loose into production data, into production equipment, even if it is sitting behind the firewall, even if it's in a demo type environment, even if it is in R&D, it still potentially poses a risk in terms of the way in which you're doing it. So, how have you? What are your kind of key lessons learned from that to essentially settle the nerves of the risk, compliance, security, and C-suite execs?
So there's two aspects of this. First of all, the cultural aspect, and the second is how you actually do it. Like, let's say the meat and potatoes. Let me first touch on the cultural aspect. So certain organizations, even in this day and age, are just going to say no to risk. And so they say no to machine learning. They say no to Gen AI. They say no to all of it. And now you're just going to see they're just not going to make it. It's just, sorry, they're just not going to make it. And because of that, a lot of companies, either through like hitting their head against the wall and realizing, oh, this is dumb, or just the general status quo, are becoming a bit more open to letting uncertain results into their enterprise. So let's say when you do machine learning, it's not a static formula. You're training it on something, and Gen AI is that, but then more so. So first you need that culture that is just open to it, that knows, okay, I cannot set everything in stone. This is the real world. There's not this like ideal that is happening. This is reality, and reality is noisy. Then the second thing, how you actually do it, like once the culture is there and people are ready for it, and that's the irony of being then an AI architect, is that the solutions that you make are very vague and noisy and opaque. But the environment, your role as an AI architect, is essentially to make a giant moat that is impenetrable, so that the solutions run safely. And that has always been the first step when I start working with clients, is to just make this terrain where the AI can live. It depends on the client, it depends on the technique that they have. And it just means going through your architecture and making sure that we can make a nice little field where it can live securely, and it's not going to be able to hurt anything. And we have total visibility on it. Essentially, do you know the book The Dome?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, essentially, it's like we put a giant glass dome over it, and so it can't touch anything except the tiny gateways that we allow. And that's it. And that means also exploring the architecture of the client, where we often find security issues.
Yeah, so I mean, in kind of old school terms, it's basically creating a DMZ for that environment, and and I think for me, the one thing that you highlighted in your first point was just getting comfortable with risk. So actually sitting down and running the risk workshops with the C-suite, with the architects, and kind of going, okay, guys, what are the risks if we don't do it? Because I think that's also a key point which you also raised, which is a lot of organizations are going, no, we don't want to do Gen AI. No, we don't want to do any kind of AI really in our environment at this point. We want to do a bit of a wait and see. And so this gives an opportunity to kind of go, okay, well, what are the risks of if we don't do it? What are the risks of if we do it? And how do we mitigate those risks, and how do we put in place controls? And again, there would be controls for not implementing it, right, as well. So there is no absolute right way, but the idea of what you're highlighting is get comfortable with a bit of risk, get comfortable with understanding what that is, and then put in place the required controls that would allow you to do that. I think, kind of moving away from the what if to more around the how. So, let's assume an organization has gotten to the point where they're accepting the risks. They've done some level of implementation in terms of a micro deployment of AI into their environment, and they're now setting up to go live. and they want to do that. So how do you bring a client? So in terms of your freelance type work, where you're sitting with a customer and you're kind of going, okay, well, you've done this, you've played with it, you started to uplift your old legacy systems. We've now shown value in terms of this process, that process. You're getting 5x, 10x improvements. How do you start setting up those departments, those processes to be AI first processes with human in the loops, and mitigate the high risk? Because the one thing about AI is that there is no set defined answer that is created every single time, right? You can ask a question, the same question 10,000 times and get 10,000 different responses ultimately, unless you put a lot of guardrails in place and a lot of templates and that kind of stuff. So how do you move from a kind of RPA type mindset into a Gen AI or limited AI or limited memory AI type mindset where you have an AI first approach?
So essentially, the way for me, I always make the differentiation between, is it going to be an internal product that we're going to use within the business to actually speed our people up, or is this going to be an external product that is going to be available? Now, once it's an external product, you get a lot more complexity. You need to put a lot of security in it. It could just be its own talk. And the most interesting thing actually is the multiplier effect of AI. And that is where the majority of it lie in making an internal AI. That's where the majority of the product actually lies. And the key there in the current state of AI is to make these AI-based workflows. So actually, obviously a lot of businesses currently they take a process and they, let's say, make it AI or try to automate it. And so you take how a human would do it, and then you take parts and interchange those for AI parts. But that doesn't really make sense. It makes sense when you're transitioning, but just like we did cloud first, when you started building in the cloud, you suddenly started building very different applications than you would have when you worked on premise. And with AI, this is the same thing, because AI can actually make that instead of doing 5 steps, it just does 1 step. And after that 1 step, it just needs checks. And maybe it needs 3 checks instead of 1 check, but then you're done. And what I suggest is when you have a new process or a process that you're ready to overhaul, is essentially tell my clients, make a matrix, and on that matrix, put all of your projects that you want to do, and just put them into how from lowest to highest, the amount of value that you think they're going to generate, and then I'll order them for you in terms of difficulty. To take the easy wins, and then start with Anthropic has a good piece on what AI workflows are. So I'm not going to repeat that. If your viewers want to look it up, it's a great piece. It's very clear. It's not that technical.
Okay, we can actually share it. We'll share it in the chat just now.
Yeah, and so these AI workflows, what they actually mean is the same way that, let's say, to do your accounting, you would open your books, you would get Excel ready, you would get a calculator out. An AI does similar things, except they're very different because it doesn't need a calculator. It doesn't need Excel, right? And to give you an example, we have let's say you have a document and you want to know from this document, okay, what rules does this document stipulate? You don't need to go through it, translate it, etc., cut it up into pieces, cross-reference it. With modern AI, you just take all the documents, you check them at the AI, they come out, you're done. That's just it. Then for the controls, you have to define how am I going to check that the output is valid? That is important. But there, the work lies on you. What is the rule? At what point do I think a rule is a rule? which is a thing that normally we already discuss when we read a piece of regulation, right? When, what makes this a must and what makes this a maybe. But now we have to codify it, make it hard. And that's where the difference lies. And if you can do that correctly, then suddenly you have to just define it once. The AI comes with the answer, and bam, your whole workflow is automated. So it's really a change. It's a change, but it's a change where the hard part is getting your definitions right. And but that was always the difficult part, was getting your definitions right. But now we're forced to.
Yeah, I like that concept around getting the definitions right, and then also forcing the rules as well. Just because we moved away from robotic process automation and into limited memory in terms of our architecture from a kind of a knowledge enhancement or knowledge enhancement perspective, is you can still use those capabilities that we've done and have used since the kind of late 70s and then the 80s, right? And bring that into the way that Gen AI can enable us. And the other piece that I really like was in terms of the process maturity is AI can do a 5-step process in one step, but then you augment you add 3 checks on the end to kind of validate that the output that you're looking for. So that is a really different way to think about how you're going to implement essentially an AI first mindset when you kind of unpacking new processes for that. Yeah, I really like it. Really, really like that. From just kind of maybe taking a little bit of a future first perspective. So if we think about back to November 2022, ChatGPT just released, that was the best version of AI that we had, right? And let's call it two and a bit years later, we have moved so far beyond that. So we're almost at a space where 18 months later, what was cutting edge is now dead as a doornail in terms of practical use from an AI perspective. So, how do you actually tool up an organization? How do you select the right tools? How do you select the right technologies when you're facing a kind of a horizon on the value of that technology that you're implementing of a maximum of 18 months? And in some instances, just a very basic AI project, could probably set you back about 25 grand or so in a very small micro business, testing it out in an R&D world and all the rest of it. But we start getting into the millions and into the billions when we start getting up all the way into kind of building out your own base models. So how do you justify the financial implementation? How do you justify the financial outlay when you've got this 18-month window?
So that's actually, I love that question, because it accidentally harks on or indirectly harks on getting your architecture right for the AI, which is the most important thing if you're going to set up AI. I've seen horror stories. I've seen like correct architectures just being thrown into the trash. But what I do want to add to your point that you brought up is not only after 18 months is it significantly better, but in 18 months, what used to take like 5 data centers to run, we can somehow run that same intelligence on our phone. And you're just like, it's not that the chip got better, but the algorithm like got more efficient. It's insane.
Yeah.
But the correct AI architecture, and this is not like a hire me pitch, and I'll tell you why it's not a hire me pitch, is because if you build your solution in such a way that you can just swap out your model for a different model, you're good.
Yeah.
You're future proof. You don't need me at that point. If you can do that, you don't need me. And it's a very, very simple question. If you're not technical, you're leading the project, and you're not sure that like your consultants, because I'll see it, especially with the big consultancy offices, that they'll like lock you in weird ways. You just force them like, hey, we're going to change the model and I want the result to still be as good. And the week after, we're going to try a third model. If you can do that, then in 18 months, when that new model comes out, you just swap out the model. I've had clients do it on projects, and they're like, this is insane because the new model is cheaper and the results are even better. And we were happy. And I'm like, you're welcome. I wasn't there to do it, but happy it works. But it's that's the great thing about generative models. And it was actually Sam Altman who proposed this kind of like architecture, and it's a great proposal, is that you shouldn't lock yourself in to the particular model. You should build on top, and you should also build on top assuming the model underneath is going to get better. So you should just be able to just hot swap it. And that doesn't mean, by the way, to buy a library that allows you to hot swap the AI, because then you're locked into the library. I'm just putting it out there because a lot of libraries are now coming out with like, hey, we can swap it out. Those libraries get outdated. We saw that too with cloud. We saw it with like front-end frameworks.
Yeah.
Don't repeat that mistake. Just get your hands dirty. That's the key part of your architecture. Be able to swap it out. If you can hot swap it, you're good. You're good.
Yeah, I think that's very sound advice, especially around not using the frameworks that are out there, because I've seen it and been burnt from a front-end perspective where you locked in.
Yeah. I mean, like I used to develop AngularJS. So like to the people who knows what pain that means, I've gone from AngularJS to Angular, which is supposedly the same thing. It was not. And with AI, so far we haven't had the same like level of burns, but yeah, you shouldn't integrate. You shouldn't like have an integrative solution. You should just be able to decouple. Absolutely.
Awesome. So we've come to the end of our 30-minute session already. I can't believe it. Thank you, Francisco. I really appreciate your time. It is really amazing. And to our audience, thank you for joining. If you found this conversation interesting and useful, please do share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you would like to reach out to me, you can get hold of me at lee.bristow@dawn-horizon.com. And in closing, Francisco, how can the audience reach out to you if they would like to further a conversation?
So my email is Francesco, so my first name @ and then Vaglienti, my last name .ai. That's it. Send an email there. I'll see you.
Awesome. And on that note, thank you and goodbye.